guys, what we talked about during our last session was essentially what is the nature of truth? How are we to relate to what, or how do we talk about truth, rather? How do we talk about truth? How do we know what is true? Now, we have to distinguish, that's a different claim. How do we know what is true as opposed to what truth is? We went through very quickly, intro sessions, we went through very quickly the nature of truth. We went through correspondence theory of truth, that truth is perspectival, that truth is determined by our cultures, that truth is determined by our upbringing, and so on and so forth. But how all of those statements can't stand under the weight of the first principles of thought, such as the law of non-contradiction. Remember, to make a truth claim or to refute a truth claim, one is simply having to use a truth claim. In order to overcome the law of non-contradiction, one is having to employ the law of non-contradiction. We could get into all the fine details of that. So there's theories that quantum mechanics refutes the law of non-contradiction and so on and so forth. All that's answerable. But again, what we want to do here is just to overview. We're trying to cover a lot of ground, so we're going to skip a lot of that. We'll offer up references to go that you can check through to offer up some of those counter arguments. But our point now is, as we move into this session, is that we want to evaluate one of the claims using what we had brought over from last session, such as the law of non-contradiction, the principles of thought, the nature of what truth is, to examine a popular notion of, at least within current culture, within the current Western culture, is that all religious truths they can all be true. Of course, right off the bat, what does that even mean to say all religious truths can be true? But that all faiths can be true at once and in the same time, in the same sense. We want to apply some of those tools that we looked at last week and look at that claim. So before we can even do that, we would have to discuss the objection that many people would say that religion is completely subjective, or religion is completely, again, perspectival, or that claims about God are subjective, rather. Again, what we talked about last session was not law of self-contradiction, but the principle of law of non-contradiction coupled with a self-defeating statement. Those statements themselves, again, can't meet their own criteria. So if one is to claim that, well, truths about God are completely subjective, again, that's a truth about God that is not subjective. That's being given in a way that is objective, that should be true, or is supposed to be taken as true for all people, whether they believe that or not. Now again, one could say, oh, that's just semantics, that's one statement. But the argument itself, if the person continues to offer arguments to hold that ideology that truths about God are subjective and so on, the argument itself will have to be an argument about God that's not subjective, not perspectival, and so on and so forth. So very quickly, to boil that down, those claims can't hold their own weight. There's actually a very popular parable given in Eastern cultures. Of course, it's made its way over to Western cultures as well at this point, about an elephant that is supposed to convey the truth that all religions are making the same claims. Just to run through that very quickly, some guys wander up on an elephant. Some guys wander up on an elephant, one grabs the tail, says, hey, this is a rope, one grabs the trunk, says, no, this is a tree limb, one grabs the tusk, no, this is a, so on and so forth, one grabs this, one grabs that. They're all saying it's different things. Off in the distance, the king is watching, the ruler, what have you, whoever you want the guy to be. He's watching this, and he sees that what they're really doing is they're all describing the same thing based upon their perspective. Now, the moral of the story is supposed to say that, see, therefore, these are like the world religions. They're all describing the one true reality, the elephant, based on their own perspective, but they're all really describing the same thing. The problem is that they're all wrong. They're not. One guy's not holding a rope. The one guy's not holding a tree limb. The one guy's not holding this side or the other or feeling a wall. They're all talking about an elephant, and they're all off on what they're talking about. In fact, the very story gives away the fact that there has to be an objective truth, because the king himself, or the observer, whoever you would have him to be, actually knows the overall picture as to what's going on, to know the truth of the situation. That all of these guys think they're describing something, but they're not. They're describing an elephant. the observer in the story, all of these religions think they're describing the truth about their religion, but they're not. He actually supposedly knows the truth of what's being said, which would have to be the truth regardless of what these guys thought that are going through the parable. Look at what the major religions claim. Let's look at just a few of those. Everybody says they basically teach the same thing. They differ as to the nature of God. Of course, pantheism says that God is not personal in the sense that he is separate and apart from his creation, transcendent over that. But pantheism says that he's part of the creation. The universe itself, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, is God. The nature of God, the nature of man. Of course, Christianity says that man is essentially sinful, has a fallen sinful nature. Many other faiths say that man is essentially good. The nature of the afterlife. Do you go to heaven? Do you go to hell? Do you go to a state of being in some way called nirvana? Do you go to what? The nature of heaven, the nature of the afterlife. These are just a few of the fundamental aspects of world religions, and they're already off. So are there similarities? Sure, there's similarities. But what we want to see is what are the core of what the teachings are, because if they are contradictory to one another in their very core, then they can't all be true. Why can't they all be true? Again, flash back to what we discussed last session, what we talked about at the beginning of this one, is that when opposite claims are being made, they can't both be true in order for there to be meaning at all. So for instance, if Hinduism or Buddhism are absolutely uncompromising on the belief in reincarnation, and Christianity, let's say, says there's no such thing at all in any shape, form, or fashion of reincarnation, but that, as the scriptures say, once you die, you face judgment, that's it. They both can't be true. Either you're reincarnated to live again, or you're never reincarnated to live again. Those both can't be true, because if you're reincarnated, then you're not reincarnated. If you're not reincarnated, you're not reincarnated. So again, we have to dispel these silly notions that all religions are essentially teaching the same thing.